It's all the same thing everywhere. In the air between us, it's the same thing, the same intelligence. And I think, this is my new pet theory, that consciousness is waking up, not humans. Consciousness doesn't care about humans. It's waking up using humans to wake up, dragging us to bookstores, dragging us to workshops, dragging us to YouTube videos about awakening, so it can look in the mirror and remember who it is. That's what I got from Miguel Ruiz. I finally was able to look in the mirror and see his divinity as a reflection of my divinity.
Is this happening to just some people or all? Can it happen to, when you say consciousness is in all of us, but there's some people that have a gross consciousness, it's a very coarse reality and a very coarse sense of self. So how could this consciousness be realized at that time? And do they need to read this book? Or is there other practical, pragmatic things that they need to do to set the beginnings for this to happen? Or can it just happen spontaneously, as it does to some?
All of the above.
Yes.
I think everybody should read my book, of course, the Everything Toltec Wisdom book, which has very complete with tools and much more kind of psychological approach, but that's just my opinion.
So that would be more accessible for everybody, your book. And it talks on a level that people could understand it on a rudimentary, elementary level that we could all relate to. Give us an example of your book, of what it's about.
Well, it's about the whole thing. Because the three masteries in the Toltec tradition of Miguel Ruiz are the mastery of awareness, the mastery of transformation, and the mastery of intent. And so this book is divided into those three parts. So the mastery of awareness is where we pretend the human is waking up and saying, oh, I've been asleep. It's really consciousness. I've been asleep and I've been dreaming, we say in Toltec, I've been dreaming, which means I've been taking in the light from the outside world and I've been distorting it according to all the stuff that was put in my brain really early on. So a little virtual reality of the world is showing up in my brain, which really isn't what's out there. And the more distorting stuff, the more brutal our childhoods, the more religious programming, the more kind of farther and farther from that reality of oneness and wholeness and love and acceptance our childhood and our early lives were, the more stuff there is to distort the beauty and perfection of the universe coming in, and the farther people are from that when they perceive it inside of them because it's been distorted. So that makes it very difficult for somebody to pick up a book like The Four Agreements or my Toltec Everything book and have it make sense, because the words come in off the page and they're going through the channels of perception in their minds, and there's all that stored junk in there, and it gets trapped and it changes it, and it makes, like, to be impeccable with your word. People read that book, First Agreement, always be impeccable with your word, and the first thing they think is they translate it into, I should be honest, I should tell the truth, I should have integrity, I should keep my commitments, I shouldn't steal pencils from the office, you know, I should. And that is so far away from what he said in the book, and it's right there in the book. It's carefully explained in the first part of that book. And I talked to so many people that distorted, they took it impeccable and it went in, and it took all of their stored light about integrity, they shifted over, responsibility, integrity, and they created a dream of it in there that's not what he said in the book, and it misses the most elemental, beautiful part of the whole story.
Which is what?
Well, he says that impeccable comes from the Latin impeccatus. Peccata is sin, and impeccata is without sin. So he says that impeccable, it comes from that root, to be without sin. Then he defines sin, which is a little scary, but he defines sin as to not use your word against yourself. That we sin when we use our word against ourselves. We are not impeccable when we use our word against ourselves. And as you said, you could use any agreement, and that's really the basic agreement right there, because if we were actually impeccable with our word, we would never use it against ourselves. We would never judge ourselves, which is a big way we all go against ourselves. If we never accepted ourselves, we'd always be in love with ourselves and be right there, right where I'm talking about, you see. One intention, one agreement. I will never judge myself. And of course we do. The minute we do it, then we judge ourselves for judging ourselves, and we're in this loop. But we just come back. We don't judge ourselves for judging ourselves, We just come back to it and we say, oh, I'm using my word against myself. I stop. Cut it off, stop, back where I was, back in this moment, and we go from there. So that's how the stored light can distort the incoming. And the more junk there is, the more it distorts. So the people with a lot of pain, a lot of hurt, a lot of addictions, it's hard for them to get the magic. And it's not that they can't, it just clogs up things. People who are really sharp and kind of clear can also get tricked because they think, oh, I'm good, my life is working, the marriage is all right, and the kids behave most of the time, and I'm making good money, so I got no problems, I got nothing to work on. That's a trick on the other side too, because they get locked into that identity, and then identifying as that external world creates fear that they'll lose it, that something will go wrong. If the wife says, I didn't like what you did, or you're late, or whatever, oh, my good husband identity is slipping, and there's fear behind all that. So you very clearly said it, that when we're really impeccable with our word and break all these old agreements that we learned, what we're doing is we're gaining personal freedom, which ultimately is the freedom from fear. And since our default state is love, joy, happiness, celebration, when we release the fear that's been pushed into us and programmed into us, we go back to our default state. And as love, and we put the universe back together. And that's what consciousness, I think, is evolving to do, is to come back and recognizing, like many people are doing now, that, oh, I took the world apart into all of these little pieces, good, bad, right and wrong, sexy, not sexy, beautiful and ugly, and I like that and I don't like that, and that one's judging me and I'm not as good as that one, and everything's a mirror of how I need to be better and more and all that. And good consciousness doesn't do that. Trees don't do that. Earthworms don't do that. Humans are the only species in the whole universe that I know of that do that.
I like that you say default and compared to a computer, that we're on our default page, which our default is of coming from our natural state of being, of love. And somehow we've programmed it, and there's a lot of other filters in there that are stopping us from being in that natural state of our default page. And our default page is basically a beautiful place to be, and so effortless. And it's amazing how people don't know of this. They're living a very complicated life, and it's unnecessary. Totally. They're bringing a lot of drama to themselves unnecessarily. I'm understanding that if people would rely on a state of being purifying, that they would rely on this way of being, of saying, okay, quite simply, should I go to the negative or should I address the positive? And in the positive, you cannot go wrong. It's all the simple, basic things that brings us to our fullness of who we are and who we can be. And when we choose this other way of that we're not in our purity, our state of natural being, then we're causing more problems for ourselves. And it's as simple as that. It's no more complicated than that. But people really are not grasping that. You as a relationship expert, what have you seen in the unfoldment of others that you have come and trained with you? You must have seen some beautiful stories.
Oh, I do. And something I'd like to touch on before we make that segue is the trick built into even many spiritual practices, along with psychology and everything, is that we should be more loving, we should be more accepting, and there's a judgment in that, there's a hierarchy in that. And the minute we buy into that hierarchy, we give it to our inner judge, and we're never really doing acceptance and love. It's based on the idea that out there somewhere there's somebody saying you should be more loving, you should be more aware, like just a new God of some kind with new rules. The two commandments, be more loving and be more spiritual or something. And the minute we allow that way of approaching it into our being, we're trapped in the duality of more and less spiritual, or more or less loving, or more or less divine. Very dangerous. And I really want to, this is something I'm hammering into people all the time, and I just want to make sure we share that here with the people watching, is that we can't push it into love. You can't make yourself be more loving, because being loving, real loving, is accepting, which is a surrender, it's an opening, it's not a, we can't make it happen. So what the Toltecs teaches, that once we have awareness of this mechanism of the light coming in and distorting itself in our channels of perception based on our old programming, is the transformation of our lives is to clean that stuff out of those channels. To be the jaguar, which is the symbol of that level of, it goes from the serpent to the jaguar to the eagle. And the jaguar stalks in the jungle of the inner mind, and its prey is the programs, it's the lies, it's the hierarchies and the false beliefs in there, the old agreements. And it's the jaguar that can find those and shake them and throw them out and say, what's a new thing I could put in this story, in the channel here, so when that thing happens on the outside and comes in and goes through the channels, it'll pick up this new story, this new agreement, and create happiness and peace, love. As long as we're bypassing that process of cleaning up that stored light, it'll always trip us up. You see how that works? And we're going to be pushing ourselves into some spiritual concept of love and acceptance, rather than actually creating it through the shifting and changing of the program.
So it's an actual process that's happening in real time.
Very important.
It's not a analytical thinking process of doing something, that you have to do something. It's an ongoing, engaging process of awareness.
Yeah.
So you start with the jaguar, then you move, and the last is the ego, and
the eagle. And the eagle
yes,
is represents the mastery of intent. After we've cleaned those channels, then the light can come through fairly clear and clean and represent what's really out there. We can never see what's really out there, because we always have to bring the information, like the organs of perception have to bring the information from the outside world to us. So we can't see out there. We see what the light and sound and taste and touch and everything brings us to here. So these are our organs of perception. Then it travels into what I call the organ of deception, which changes it and gives us a little virtual reality in there and say, that's what's out there. And part of the mastery of awareness is realizing, wow, I can't really trust what I'm thinking is out there, because I've changed it. And the more garbage I've got in there, the more I've changed it. You looking at me, that kind of thing. No, what are you talking about? Yeah, I saw you looking at me. Let's go outside in the parking lot. It's like, I'll take, because it's distorted into that, in that case, kind of anger and taking it personally and stuff, when it didn't even happen, you see. So, once you've cleaned those channels of perception, of which the Toltecs have amazing tools, and I've added a few from my own psychological background, but they're just amazing things that we can do to use to become aware and then transform that stored light.